Have you ever walked past a moss-covered hill and felt watched? Tonight we follow that feeling, that hush, that sudden sense that your footstep has landed somewhere it wasn't meant to. We'll drift between lava folds and vellum scrolls, seeking the quiet world of Iceland's hidden people and the medieval maps that claimed they existed. Unless, of course, you accidentally rearrange their moss furniture, in which case you probably won't survive this. Or, at the very least, your GPS will stop working until you say sorry. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know, where are you listening from and what time is it there? I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step softly into Iceland's southern countryside. The wind is low, but constant, moving across the grass in threads. Around you, lava rocks rise like frozen waves, wrapped in velvety moss that clings tight to every surface. It's not silent, but the kind of quiet that hushes you automatically. You walk slower here. You breathe differently, and though there's no one in sight, you're certain you're not alone. Welcome to a land where a doorway doesn't need to be visible to be real. In Iceland, the stories of the Huldufólk, literally the hidden people, are not just campfire tales or forgotten folklore. They're landscape companions. Ask around, and you'll hear more than one Icelander tell you with a shrug and a smile that yes, maybe elves live in that hill. No, they wouldn't want it moved. And yes, it's probably best to go around it. A mainstream cultural fact. In surveys conducted in Iceland over the last several decades, a consistent portion of the population, anywhere from 30% to 60%, say they believe in the possibility of elves or hidden people, or at the very least, that they wouldn't want to risk disrespecting them. This isn't fringe. This is social caution with mossy teeth. The ground beneath you softens. You step over a stone that juts oddly like a doorstop placed by an invisible tenant. Somewhere to your right, a sheep bleats. Once, then goes quiet. The sun is low, caught behind a drift of fog that rolls slow and thick across the hills. You pause, and for a moment it looks like there's a clearing in the mist, a hollow of perfectly smooth grass ringed by stones. But when you blink again, it's gone. This is the kind of place where land and story are the same. A quirky belief passed down for centuries tells of houses that rearrange themselves inside should a human visitor fail to knock. Doors that vanish if you're uninvited. Beds made of lichen, and songs that don't echo unless someone is listening. And always, always the stone that no one moves, even if it's in the way of a perfectly good road. We'll get to that stone, the one they rerouted traffic for. But first, a map. Because in medieval Iceland, especially from the 13th to 16th centuries, map-making wasn't just geography. It was belief rendered in ink. Early Icelandic cartographers, including monks trained in Latin and Norse lore, often blended natural terrain with mythic annotation drawings of mysterious valleys, unnamed guestlands, sea monsters curling near the fjords, and yes, territories with markings that scholars still debate today. Was that hilltop an elevation line? or a warning. A scholarly debate continues over a 15th century parchment found in Huldufólk, one that features an unlabeled bulge near the Reykjanes Peninsula. Some say it's a geological feature misrepresented by distance. Others argue that it aligns precisely with the site of a well-documented elf stone, a large lava boulder around which no church nor road has ever been allowed to pass. The more you look, the less you can be sure what's cartography and what's courtesy. You crouch near the edge of one moss-slicked hill. There's no sign, no trail marker, no rope. But you just know. You're not supposed to go further, and so you turn, not out of fear, but out of respect. Because in Iceland, the world isn't just populated by what's visible. It's written in layers of moss, of ink, of memory, and tonight, you'll follow each one softly, step by careful step, into a story no one can fully see. The fog hugs the hillside behind you as you move on, boots crunching softly over lichen-laced rock and frost-bitten grass. The wind is slower here, but it still presses against your coat, like an old friend trying to guide you back, perhaps hoping you'll reconsider disturbing whatever lies beneath the next bend. But you continue, not recklessly, just curiously. Because tonight, we press deeper into the stories whispered beneath the stone, into the shadowy folds of Iceland's oral tradition, where the Huldufólk, the hidden people, are not merely a footnote in myth, but tenants of the land itself. You reach a flat outcrop, slick with green and gray, and lower yourself to sit. It's not warm, but somehow it feels like it's watching out for you, or at the very least that it expects your presence to be temporary. You listen. There's the wind, the occasional chirp of a ptarmigan, and something else. Not quite a sound. More a sensation, like the quiet attention of something standing behind a door you can't see, waiting to decide if you're a guest or a trespasser. A mainstream fact. The Huldufólk are described in Icelandic oral tradition as tall, fair-skinned, often wearing traditional 19th century Icelandic clothing, though their features shift slightly in each retelling. They live inside stones, lava formations, or within hidden folds of the earth, and are considered highly territorial, sometimes helpful, sometimes vengeful, but always expecting respectful distance. You brush your hand across the moss. Somewhere underneath could be an entire household, tables, chairs, carved bone spoons, and fireplaces that glow without smoke. Or at least that's what the stories say. A quirky belief holds that the Huldufólk live parallel lives. They herd their own animals, bake their own bread, host weddings and funerals, and occasionally attend human events unseen unless someone spills a secret or drinks too much at a midsummer feast. Children who disappear for hours in the highlands often return with a new word in their mouth, or a tune no one taught them. You stand again, moving slowly along a path that no one made but everyone uses. The rocks here seem deliberate, as if placed. You avoid stepping on them, not because they're unstable, because they might be doorsteps. One of the most famous legends tells of a young woman in 18th century Reykjavik who went missing for an entire week during winter, only to return with clean clothes, braided hair, and a story of a warm place in the stones where she'd been invited to rest. She never elaborated, but kept fresh milk outside her door every Thursday for the rest of her life. You pause now beside a stone the size of a chair. It doesn't look different, but it feels important. And according to some Icelanders, that's exactly how it should feel. A scholarly debate continues around the precise origin of the Huldufólk stories. Are they an evolution of Norse Alfar elves mixed with local land spirits, or did they emerge independently as a spiritual personification of Iceland's dramatic terrain? Folklorist Jón Arnason recorded hundreds of Huldufólk tales in the 19th century, many passed down orally for centuries. But even he admitted, they are told with such consistency across the island that it is difficult to disbelieve without also disbelieving the mountains themselves. You think of that, and the stone beside you, and how many people would step over it, or take a picture, or lean on it without thought. But you step around it. Because there are places in Iceland where the air feels thicker, where the moss grows deeper, and where the land seems to watch you back. Some say the hidden people are just a metaphor for isolation, for respect for the unpredictable kindness of strangers. But others say that metaphor is just a polite word for something we've never dared name properly. You walk on. The hill crests, and beyond it, a small house comes into view, its roof curved slightly around the edge of another large stone. No one's outside, but the lights are on. And you already suspect the house was built that way on purpose. The house you see ahead doesn't follow normal geometry. Its side curves inward, not for aesthetics or wind protection, but for something far more invisible. A large lava rock, rounded, moss-covered, slightly pointed, like the back of a sleeping troll, juts from the earth, no more than 3 feet from the structure. But instead of removing it, the builders had worked around it. The entire house bends to accommodate the stone. Tonight we step softly past thresholds and into the everyday decisions that make the house that curved around a rock more than just an oddity. It's a story, a conversation with the unseen. You approach the house slowly. No one comes to the door, but it doesn't feel abandoned. The lights inside are warm, flickering almost too gentle for electricity. There's a cart beside the porch, half filled with chopped wood, the handle dusted with snow. One window is slightly open, as if someone didn't want the inside air to get too comfortable. You don't knock, but you glance toward the rock, and for the second time tonight, you feel that stillness behind the stone. A mainstream cultural fact. Icelandic road and construction projects have frequently been delayed or altered due to public concern over elf dwellings. In 2012, a proposed highway near Reykjavik was rerouted to avoid an elf rock after protests and spiritual consultations. Even construction companies often consult mediums to determine if a site is acceptable before breaking ground. You walk around the side of the house. A garden lies dormant, tucked beneath snow and silence. But even in winter, the paths curve away from certain stones. It's as though the garden, like the home, was drawn in conversation with something it didn't want to offend. You touch one of the fence posts. It's carved with small patterns, circles and double loops, symbols associated with protective Icelandic staves. Nothing flashy. Just quiet reassurance that this space is watched over and watching back. A quirky belief common in Icelandic farming communities tells of tools going missing if left too close to elf rocks. Hammers vanish, scythes refuse to cut, and even cows have been known to walk backward for no apparent reason, only calming once they're led away from certain fields. To this day, many Icelanders will not build fences across certain lava outcrops, even if it means giving up usable land. You lean against a fence rail, careful not to put pressure on the stone beside you. From the other side of the garden, a small dog appears. It doesn't bark. Just watches you for a moment, then pads around the rock, not over it, before settling into a patch of straw. You swear it gives the stone a nod. You whisper, hello, not to the dog, but to whatever it avoided stepping on. Inside the house movement. A figure walks past the window, silhouetted against warm lamplight. You see them pause at the sink, hands resting on the edge, as if they're waiting for something to bubble up from the silence. They don't look out, but somehow you feel acknowledged. A scholarly debate persists around whether these design accommodations, the bending of buildings, the rerouting of roads, stem from genuine spiritual belief, or simply from a national respect for folklore that's grown into civic habit. But as one Reykjavik urban planner once put it, even if we don't believe, we still listen. Because it's never just about the stone. You sit now on a flat rock beside the curved house, hands in your lap. The wind curls around the moss, slow and steady. You look back at the house, at the way its side bows gently, like a shoulder leaning away in deference, at the gravel path that splits to avoid stepping on the hillock, at the garden rows that swerve slightly left just before they reach a lichen-capped mound. And you think, maybe the most respectful act isn't just belief. It's not needing to be right in order to be kind. You nod to the stone and get up to leave. The dog follows for a while, then stops, right at the edge of the moss, like it knows where your world ends, and someone else's begins. The path winds downhill, now veering just slightly away from the house that bowed politely to the stone. You walk with care, not because the ground is slippery, but because something in you has shifted, a hush inside the hush. A light snow begins to fall, soft flakes that catch in the folds of your coat and vanish without melting. Ahead, a small wooden sign, barely legible, worn smooth by weather and time. It reads nothing more than Veidemannastein, Hunter's Stone. But there's no hunting trail here, just a moss-covered rock the size of a horse's shoulder, squatting at the intersection of two faint dirt paths. And you already know this isn't a marker. It's a warning. Tonight we explore the strange and quietly official world of laws for elves and the judges who sometimes, without smirking, uphold them. A mainstream fact, Iceland has no official legal code recognizing elves or hidden people. And yet in practice, the planning and environment ministries often take their presence into account. When enough citizens report spiritual disturbance or concern about elf dwellings construction, can be paused, rerouted, or reviewed with folkloric consultants. It's not law per se, but it might as well be. You kneel beside the Hunter's Stone, not touching, just close. The air here feels thicker, like something in it has decided to hold its breath. A nearby sign, newer nailed to a weathered post, warns that heavy machinery must not enter this zone until further notice. And the notice? It's dated 10 years ago. You smile softly. there's a quirky belief that if you disturb a stone-dwelling, machines will fail, phones will die, and workers will fall ill. Not dramatically, just inconveniently enough that no one wants to test it twice. At one quarry in 1996, excavators stopped working every time they approached a particular rock. The crew eventually brought in a medium who told them to leave a gift of rye bread and coffee. The machines worked perfectly afterward. You sit now on a log placed conveniently nearby. You wonder, was this log placed here for people like you? Curious, polite, a little superstitious? Or was it placed for them so they could watch without needing to stand? A scholarly debate has long circled around whether these interruptions and protections are state-sanctioned folklore, appeasement, or simply bureaucratic patience with local culture. But then there's the 2013 case, where the Icelandic Road Administration rerouted a highway around a known elf rock, not just for tradition, but because machines kept breaking down, and it was the simplest way to calm things down. You glance at the rock, still quiet, still mossy, still profoundly unmoved. Like it doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. It just doesn't want to be pushed. You breathe in the cold air. It smells like earth and wet stone, and something faintly metallic like the inside of a tool shed that no one's used in a decade. A breeze lifts a curl of moss on the top of the stone, just slightly, then lets it fall again. Maybe it was the wind, maybe it wasn't. You stand, bow not deeply, just a nod. The way you'd greet someone who's already opened the door but hasn't decided whether to let you in. And then you walk on, back up the trail past the veering paths toward the next ridge. Somewhere up there another story waits. And the stone, it stays. Not because it can't move, but because it doesn't have to. The trail rises gently again, winding past low shrubs dusted with frost. A raven watches from a boulder, cocking its head as if measuring your footfall. You nod politely. It blinks once and looks away. You crest the next hill to find the remnants of a turf chapel, sunken, softened, and furred in thick moss, like the land itself has tried to forget it ever housed prayers that didn't belong to it. Because tonight, we're stepping between stories, between scripture and shadow, into the half-lit space where the church met the hidden folk. You cross what would have been the threshold, the wood long since rotted, the door long since gone. The interior is open to sky and snowfall now, but the stones are still laid with care. Beneath one window frame, a cornerstone has been deliberately left untouched. A neat rectangular boulder with dark streaks and a stubborn patch of moss that never quite dies. A mainstream fact. When Christianity came to Iceland in the year 1000 AD, it did not erase the land's existing spirit world. It coexisted with it. Iceland's conversion was peaceful, largely negotiated, and as a result, many pagan traditions, including beliefs about land spirits and hidden folk, persisted alongside Christian rituals. Many 12th–14th century ecclesiastical texts reference elf-like beings as real presences that could either help or hinder the faithful. You walk the edge of the old chapel and look out across the valley. Fog is beginning to rise again, slow and sheet-like. The air is thick with silence, but it's not the silence of absence. It's the silence of attention. A quirky belief recorded in 13th century clerical notes suggests that the hidden ones will only kneel at the altar when no eyes are upon them. Several rural priests claimed they'd return in the morning to find fresh moss laid where pews should have been, or hoof prints that stopped at the chapel door and vanished. Others claimed certain stones could never be removed from beneath church walls, stones that bled when struck with a hammer. You sit near the altar, where the ground rises in a slight mound, the only suggestion of sanctity remaining. Someone has placed a small woven bundle of grass on the altar stone. Recently. It's still green, tied with red thread. A silent offering. You leave it alone. Because this chapel wasn't cleansed of spirits, it was shared with them. A scholarly debate continues over whether these elf-Christian overlaps were strategies for conversion, reframing local beliefs in saintly language, or whether Icelanders simply refused to discard what worked. After all, if you'd lived your whole life with a boulder that blinked back once or twice, would baptism really change your landscaping plans? You look again at the untouched cornerstone. There are scratch marks on it. Not deep, not decorative. Just small, regular notches. Perhaps tool sharpening. Perhaps a signature. Perhaps something left behind by fingers that weren't quite human, but needed to write anyway. The air around you smells of damp earth and old wax, though there's no candle here, and hasn't been for centuries. You close your eyes and imagine the last priest, standing here in winter wool cloak, heavy with snow, whispering a prayer not to heaven, but to the rock in the floor. Not because he worshipped it, but because he respected it. You open your eyes. The stone hasn't moved, but somehow it feels like it's listening. You rise slowly, brush the moss off your coat, and step backward through the chapel's missing door. Outside, the wind has picked up, slightly tugging gently at the threads of your hood. You don't look back. Not because you're scared, but because something in you remembers the hidden people don't like to be watched when they kneel. You follow the hillside eastward, tracing the edge of the vanished chapel as the fog drifts in behind you like a curtain drawing closed. The wind is colder now, carrying the sharp scent of lichen and ink. If ink had a smell, a dry, crackling quiet, like the breath of a page just before it's turned. Because tonight, we walk alongside the hands that drew the secrets, those medieval cartographers who sketched Iceland, not just with coastlines and mountains, but with mysteries, monsters, and lands that moved when watched. The path turns narrow, hugging a ridge of jagged basalt. At its peak, you find what looks like an outcrop, but it isn't stone. It's parchment, flattened under glass, bolted to a post, a modern display, a map. It's a reproduction of the Huldufólk map, drawn in 1570 by Icelandic Bishop Gudbrandur Thorlaksson. You trace it with your eyes, a squiggled coast, familiar fjords, and then something odd. On the western edge, a landmass labeled Vitramannaland, white men's land, an unconfirmed territory supposedly inhabited by Christian descendants of a Scottish monk who fled north. A mainstream historical fact, Medieval Icelandic maps often included mythical or semi-believed territories drawn based on second-hand accounts, monastic guesswork, or folklore. These included not just unexplored islands, but regions inhabited by invisible or non-human beings. Cartographers like Thorlaksson often blurred lines between theology, oral myth, and topography. Beside the mysterious landmass are creatures fish with wolf heads, sea serpents curled in looped knots, and a black mountain marked only with the word troll. You glance down the valley. It's quiet, but the moss seems to quiver faintly beneath the weight of attention. A quirky belief, early map makers sometimes used magical inks blended with herbs or consecrated in candlelit rituals to ensure the truth of the land would not move while being drawn. One Icelandic scribe supposedly kept a small pouch of moss in his sleeve to prevent forgetting what could not be seen. That moss, according to legend, still glows faintly when brought near old maps. You lean closer to the display. There, in the bottom left corner, a cluster of dots almost too faint to notice. A hill, a hollow, and a circle labeled simply Sjón ver fingar stadur, a place of sight blurring. Folklorists still argue about that label. Some say it denotes an area of visual confusion, rocks that vanish, paths that shift people who walk through snow and leave no trail. Others believe it's an invitation that if you find the spot on the map and stand still long enough, something will make itself known. You look up from the map and across the valley. A hill rises there, neither large nor steep, but somehow watchful. The kind of place you wouldn't think to climb unless you'd just read about it on a scroll made from sheep vellum. You smile to yourself and walk on, not to chase belief, but to walk alongside it. Because maps don't just show you where to go. Sometimes they remind you which places should never be hurried through. The hill you saw from the map stand draws closer now, but it doesn't rise as much as it settles broad and soft at the edges with moss, so thick it swallows footprints before they've even finished falling. There's no trail leading up, just a natural fold in the grass that invites without encouraging. Still, you climb. Not forcefully, just enough to see what isn't meant to be found easily. Because tonight, you step into a modern tale, a quietly whispered story from not so long ago, when machines failed and silence held its ground. This is the story of the rock that vanished a road crew. You pause at the top. The view opens wide hills to the west, low fields, ribboned with fence lines, and a small gravel road curling far below. That road, you've heard, was supposed to go straight, but instead it curves oddly, like someone nudged a ruler off course. And at the center of that curve, a large moss-covered boulder. Nothing special at first glance, but the longer you look, the more you notice the road narrows near it. The fence gives way, and the snow around its base is somehow unsettled, even though the wind hasn't touched the rest of the field. You descend slowly, breath visible in short puffs. This stone has a reputation. A mainstream fact. In 2011, near the town of Bolungarvík in the West Fjords, construction on a new road stalled for weeks due to a large rock that heavy machinery failed repeatedly to move. Hydraulic arms broke, engines cut out, workers fell ill, Local residents insisted the rock was an elf dwelling, and eventually, after a consultation with a seer, the project was rerouted. The stone left entirely undisturbed. You reach it now. It stands shoulder height, flecked with frost, and covered in moss so old it has layers bright green on top, charcoal gray beneath. A small indentation at its base looks just large enough for a door if you're the size of someone who prefers not to be seen. You don't touch it, but you do feel something in your teeth like static, or a hum, or the sense that this space is already full even if no one else is visible. A quirky belief common among Icelandic construction workers is that elf-related problems aren't random. They only occur when a project lacks proper blessing or when the site is entered with arrogance. One story tells of a machine operator who refused to greet a known elf stone before digging. His machine's brakes failed, and the axle split in two. He returned the next day, bowed to the rock, and finished the job without issue. You step back now slowly and sit on a nearby fallen fence post. No one comes. No wind stirs. But the sense of presence remains. You think about the road crew, the frustration, the broken equipment, the call to a folklore consultant not for superstition, but for civic harmony, and the quiet moment when someone probably holding a clipboard looked at the maps and said, "Let's just go around it." A scholarly debate continues in Icelandic academia about the boundaries between cultural ritual and infrastructural planning. Is this appeasement of tradition a superstition given paperwork? Or, as one anthropologist wrote, a soft strategy for preserving the landscape's dignity even when no one's watching? You watch the boulder now. It doesn't move. It doesn't need to. Because the point isn't that it's powerful. The point is that it was listened to. You breathe out. The cold catches in your chest, but gently. You rise again, nod once to the stone, and begin to walk the road's curve, the one that bends not because of terrain, but because of an unmovable invitation to humility. The road curves behind you now, a subtle bend that will forever remind a quiet handful of people where belief met asphalt and didn't blink. You walk beyond the gravel and into a grassy valley that lies low between two ridges. There's a hush here, not because it's late, but because it's that time of year. Snow clings to the northern slope. A small creek cuts through the field, crusted at the edges with ice, and beyond it, faint in the distance, a circle of stones sits arranged like a clock that's forgotten how to tick. Because tonight, we wander into the chill of folklore's calendar, to the seasonal sightings, when the hidden people are said to stir shift, and sometimes step through the veil just enough to be noticed. And if you're walking near their homes on Christmas or midsummer, well, unless you know the rules, you probably won't survive the invitation. Or worse, you might say yes. A mainstream cultural fact. In Icelandic tradition, the hidden people are most active around the winter solstice and midsummer, especially on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. During these nights, they are believed to travel throw parties and attempt to lure humans into their dwellings, sometimes for company, sometimes for mischief, sometimes forever. You step over the creek on a narrow wooden bridge, old but sturdy. There's no wind here, but the air feels busy, like the forest itself is holding its breath to let others pass unseen. You pass through a patch of low juniper and stop. In the middle of the clearing, a smooth stone draped in a dusting of snow with 3 small offerings laid upon it. A silver coin, a folded scrap of cloth, and what appears to be a single almond. No footprints lead to them. They've simply been placed. A quirky belief passed down especially in rural Iceland says that during the 12 nights of Christmas, humans must not sit at crossroads after dark. At these crossroads, it is believed that elves and other beings may appear to offer food, drink, or invitations to follow them. If you refuse politely, you're rewarded with luck. If you accept or insult them, you may vanish for days or return not quite right. You don't sit, but you lower yourself to one knee beside the stone, studying the gifts. The silver is old, possibly antique. The cloth is embroidered in red looped knots, a protective sigil. The almond is intact, unfrosted. Someone placed it there this morning. You hear a soft rustle from the ridge. You look, but there's no one. Not visibly, anyway. A scholarly debate continues over whether these seasonal tales were meant as warnings, symbolic rituals for the dark winter nights, or actual coded practices from pre-Christian customs. Some anthropologists suggest that the parties of the hidden folk are echoes of ancient midwinter rites. Others note the remarkable consistency with which Icelanders across centuries describe the same dates, the same behaviors, and the same places to avoid. You stand again, and something inside you shifts not out of fear, but hospitality. The kind you offer to strangers in your home when you're not quite sure why they've come, but you hope they'll leave a good impression behind. In the village beyond the ridge, you know that Christmas candles will be placed in windows not just for beauty, but so that any traveling hidden people might find their way peacefully. Children still set out plates of food, and some households leave a seat empty at the table, not as a joke, just in case. You walk on. The circle of stones disappears behind you. A bird calls once, soft, uncertain. The snow begins again, a slow drift of tiny flakes that catch the starlight, but not your shoulders. And up ahead, just around the next bend, is a small turf house, with a lantern burning gently in the doorway. You already know no one's home. But the lantern was lit anyway. Because tonight someone might walk by, someone who isn't supposed to be seen, and who, if treated kindly, just might leave your boots by the door in the morning cleaned. The turf house is smaller than you expected, hunched low into the hillside, as if it's learned the secret to staying warm is to hide from the wind. Its walls are made of stacked stone, and sod thick with tin and layered with patience. You step closer, careful not to disturb the snow-crusted edges of the footpath leading to the door. The lantern flickers. Not bright, just present. Like it knows it's not supposed to guide you, only warn you that you're already being watched. Tonight we sit in the weather's breath, listening to the wind and wondering, why does it sound like a whisper? Why do sudden storms follow strange dreams? And what happens when the clouds themselves seem to carry a message? Because in Iceland, the Huldufólk aren't just neighbors. They're part of the weather system. A mainstream belief still alive today holds that the hidden people are often associated with fog storms and shifting winds, especially sudden changes in visibility near boulder fields, lava flows, or stone circles. Entire areas are known to locals as not quite safe during mist, or places where the fog walks faster than the wind. You stand still now in front of the turf house. The door is closed, but not latched. The snow just in front of it is smooth, undisturbed, except for one small set of impressions. Not boot prints, just 3 neat ovals, as though someone had leaned forward on tiptoe and disappeared into the wall. You don't knock. Instead, you turn your face to the sky. The clouds are folding in thick and flat gray at the edges, with sudden white streaks like chalk dragged over velvet. The air smells sharp ozone and lichen, and something metallic like stone waking up. A quirky belief from the northern fjords says that when fog moves against the wind, it's being carried by hidden people, relocating between dwellings. One common sign: animals grow restless winds shift mid-sentence, and people feel unusually tired, like something is borrowing the room just behind their eyes. You blink now. The turf house seems smaller than it did, then larger, then perfectly ordinary again. The lantern goes out. No wind touched it. You step back, not quickly, just enough. And then the wind returns. Only now it has teeth. Not fierce, just purposeful. It circles you once, carrying with it the sound of rustling birch, though there are no trees nearby. You hear 3 distinct knocks from the other side of the house. You don't investigate. Because you've read enough, heard enough, and listened enough to know better. A scholarly debate continues over the supposed coincidences between weather anomalies and reported Huldufólk sightings. Meteorologists who've studied sudden localized storms in Iceland note that microclimates around lava fields and fjords can shift rapidly, but concede that many such shifts occur in places strongly associated with hidden people and with startling narrative consistency. You begin to walk again. The path curls along the edge of the ridge, and the snow grows thicker. But your steps are lighter. Because once you've seen a lantern go out like that without wind, without warning, you walk like a guest, not a trespasser. You remember an old saying, half joke, half warning. If your hat flies off and turns left, go home. If it turns right, apologize to the fog and wait where you are. You reach a rise in the path. Below you, the valley opens wide, gray and green and utterly quiet. And in the center, far below, a single stream winds like a silver thread through folded rock. The fog drifts down toward it, not fast, not natural, just exactly as if it knows where it's going. The fog slips into the valley like a tired ghost ready to lie down, curling low into every fold of stone and grass until the earth seems to breathe in slow, damp patterns. You descend the trail quietly, boots softened by moss, the path so narrow that your coat brushes both hill and air. At the base of the slope, you find what you didn't expect to see: a bench tucked beside a hollow tree and half sunken into the soil, as if someone had left it there centuries ago, and the land decided not to object. Tonight, we sit beside scrolls and riddles, turning pages yellowed by breath and time, and we search for meaning in the map with no north, a manuscript, A monk and a mystery with ink that runs as crooked as a forgotten trail. You dust the snow from the bench and sit. The ground beneath it is dry, protected. Someone or something wanted this space to be readable. You unwrap a parcel from your satchel, a folded printout copied from the archives of a Reykjavik museum. It's a reproduction of manuscript AM 736-2, dated to the early 1300s, written by an unnamed monk believed to have lived in the West Fjords. The map inside is circular, not rectangular. There is no compass rose, no latitude, no north. Instead, the top of the circle is marked by a drawing of a hooded figure with blank eyes standing beside a rune-marked boulder. Beneath his feet, a line of text that reads Eigi öl sin eru fyrir augu gerd. Not all sights are made for the eyes. A mainstream historical fact. Several medieval Icelandic manuscripts include non-standard maps, circular, symbolic, or spiritually aligned rather than geographically accurate. Some scholars believe these were never meant to guide travelers physically, but spiritually or ritually, describing not how to move through space, but how to behave in it. You trace the lines. At the map's center is a lake that doesn't exist on any modern chart. Around it dots that suggest homes, caves, or sites. Some are labeled with names like Echo Place and Quiet Rock. One, disturbingly, is simply marked with a spiral, and none of them are connected by roads. Only arrows, bent and looping, leading to questions, not destinations. A quirky belief, especially among 14th century Icelandic clerics, held that certain places cannot be drawn without their permission. Mapmakers supposedly fasted, prayed, or burned juniper before attempting to chart spiritually significant sites. Some claimed their quills would scratch out the same line again and again, no matter how hard they tried to redirect their ink. You turn the page. On the reverse side, a set of marginal notes written in a hand far shakier than the rest. They read, I dreamed of the hill again. The door was gone. I could still smell the bread. They did not ask questions this time. They only hummed. You feel a chill not from the snow, but from recognition, because you've walked past a hill like that. And though you don't remember any smell, there was something humming beneath your ribs as you passed. A scholarly debate continues about this manuscript. Some believe it's a devotional exercise, monks using metaphor and mystery to express doubt and faith. Others think it was a record of spiritual encounters rendered as geography because there was no other way to write what they'd seen. And still others believe it was not a map at all, but a warning disguised as worship. You fold the copy gently and return it to your satchel. The wind has dropped to nothing now. The bench creaks slightly, not with your weight, but with time. You reach out and touch the hollow tree beside you. It's warm. Just at the base. Just where a hand might go if it were reaching for something hidden inside. You withdraw your hand, stand, and look down into the valley where the fog has settled fully now, thick and unmoving, like it's thinking. You leave the bench, quietly, respectfully, and without looking back, because some maps may not have a north, but they always have a center, and sometimes that center is you. You climb slowly out of the valley boots, crunching softly over frost-slick grass. The air is colder now, and the fog no longer moves, it just sits. Watching. Waiting. As you reach the crest of the next ridge, you find yourself staring at an old slate slab stuck upright in the soil. It's not a grave marker, at least not in the usual sense. Etched faintly into its surface is the outline of a creature long coiled with fins like wings, and a face that is not a face at all, but a pair of slits and a single dot in the center of its head. It doesn't resemble anything you've seen in nature, but you've seen it before, on a map. Tonight, we step to the edge of the known world, where medieval cartographers once scribbled warnings and dragons guarded the threshold to elf territory. You kneel before the slab, run your fingers over the cold etchings. The design is deeply worn but unmistakable, a mainstream fact. Medieval Icelandic and European maps often used mythical creatures, especially sea monsters, to mark unknown or dangerous regions. These symbols were not always literal. They could mean, here be danger, here be mystery, or here be the edge of what the church is willing to explain. But here's the curious part. On a handful of these maps, the monsters aren't in the sea. They're in the hills. A copy of the 1585 Ortelius Iceland map, widely circulated in Europe, includes a dragon-like serpent near Snæfellsnes slithering inland. Another map shows a fog-covered mountain labeled Elfheim, home of the hidden folk. The region is ringed with small lizard-like beasts, each drawn facing away from the center, as if they too knew better than to intrude. You sit back, looking out across the rocky terrain. Nothing moves. And yet, the silence is thick with attention. A quirky belief survives in parts of Iceland's northwestern fjords, where dragons appear on maps. The hidden people are stronger. These areas are treated with extreme caution, especially during midsummer and the Yuletide nights. Elders once warned children, if you see the fog roll uphill, there don't follow. Not even if it calls you by name. You look again at the slab. It seems to shimmer slightly at the edges, but that's probably the wind playing tricks. Or maybe it isn't. You remember a story told to school children near Húsavík of a girl who claimed to see a lizard with antlers perched on a hill. When her father returned to the spot, he found only a ring of scorched grass and a cracked slate stone. They built a cairn over the site, and no one has touched it since. You take a small stone from the ground, set it gently beside the slab, not as tribute, just to join the pattern. A scholarly debate remains unresolved about these inland monsters. Were they metaphors for volcanic activity, symbols of paganism, or were they like so many things on these maps, intentional ambiguities left open so that faith, fear, and folklore could share space without contradiction? You rise and begin to walk the edge of the ridge. Below you, the land stretches open again, hills folding like waves in slow motion, moss shimmering faintly in the dying light. At the far end of the horizon, a thin spire of rock pierces the sky. You know what's there. You've read the maps. It's not labeled as a danger. but it's never named. You smile softly, because sometimes what isn't drawn is what was meant to be seen. And if dragons once guarded the edge of elf territory, maybe they weren't keeping humans out. Maybe they were keeping something in. The wind changes again, not in force, but in direction. It now curls from behind the rock spire on the horizon, slipping down the slope, and into your collar like a breath that's forgotten its manners. The moss trembles slightly beneath your boots. You stop, not in fear, in preparation. Because tonight, you learn the etiquette of the invisible, the rules you keep not to avoid offense, but to show you understand that you're not the only one using this road. Tonight, you learn how to apologize to something you can't see. You walk along a narrow sheep path, tracing the line of a low stone wall. It dips and rises, turning sharply at a dark hump of lava. The trail could easily go over it, but instead it detours around, as if every step taken here for the last 300 years had agreed on a polite avoidance. A mainstream cultural truth. Even today, Icelanders will sometimes speak aloud when passing a known elf site, offering greetings or apologies. Phrases like "Vid skulum ekki trufla," let us not disturb, are spoken to the rocks, the hills, or the empty air. It's not always belief, it's manners. You follow the bend around the lava mound and stop. There's something here, not visible, but felt. It's like walking into a room where someone was just laughing and stopped. You clear your throat. Quietly say, "Fyrirgefdu." Forgive me, nothing answers, but the moss seems to soften slightly beneath your feet. A quirky belief recorded in 1950s interviews with rural Icelanders describes incidents where construction workers, hikers, or shepherds would become suddenly disoriented or physically stuck after offending a stone guest. In most cases, offering an apology aloud, sometimes coupled with a verse or a small food gift, caused the strange effect to lift instantly. You recall one story, a man who got lost walking his usual route home. Fog surrounded him. His compass spun. When he whispered, "I meant no harm," the fog cleared within seconds. The moral wasn't fear. It was politeness. You sit now on a rounded rock, ordinary, unassuming. But you don't lean back. You sit upright, respectful, like you're sharing a bench. Because maybe you are. A scholarly debate continues among folklorists. Is this type of apology a vestigial superstition, a psychological grounding ritual, or a form of spiritual diplomacy? Many point to the consistency of outcomes across generations. Those who greet the stones tend to have smoother journeys. Those who don't, well, delays happen. You take a small piece of bread from your coat pocket. It's old from lunch. Dry. You set it gently on the rock beside you. And you say, "For any hunger I might have stepped over. For any silence I've broken." Then you smile. Because now, even if nothing was offended, you've made a gesture. And in Iceland, gestures carry more than intention. They carry history. As you rise to your feet again, the wind curls around your left side, cool, soft, like a sleeve brushing past. It lifts the edge of your coat briefly, then continues on down the path away from the hill. You watch it leave, and for a moment you're sure you see a shadow where no hill rises. It's gone in a blink, but you bow just in case. Because in this country, not everything that leaves footprints asks for permission, but most of it accepts an apology. You follow the trail a little longer now, past scattered sheep droppings and brittle grass that pokes through patches of retreating snow. The light is low. Not quite twilight, but the kind of quiet sky that's getting ready for it. You crest a small ridge, and what greets you below is unusual. A freshly paved road gleaming black against the pale land. And then it just stops. The tarmac ends abruptly mid-curve, like someone changed their mind halfway through a thought. The gravel continues for a few meters. Then nothing. A short concrete barrier rests at the edge, bright orange paint flaking like old sunburn. Beside it, a hand-painted sign nailed to a post. In Icelandic, it reads, Vid aquadum ad hlusta. We decided to listen, because tonight we arrive at the edge of the town that canceled a road forever, and in doing so reminded the world that belief, when held collectively, can pave or unpave the future. You descend toward the road. Tire tracks still mark the approach. Faint. Old. A machine was here once, but it hasn't returned. You walk the edge, stopping just before the drop. The pavement ends with no fanfare, like someone lifted a brush mid-paint. A mainstream cultural fact. In 2013, near the Alftans Peninsula, a planned road project was halted indefinitely following public protest, environmental concerns, and spiritual consultation. Protesters, some of whom were folklorists and self-proclaimed seers, argued the road would disturb an elf dwelling. After lengthy discussion, the project was scrapped. The boulder in question still untouched. The road was never resumed. You glance around. There's no signage explaining the real reason, just that one wooden post. But beyond the barrier, the land stretches smooth and undisturbed, as though something claimed it back. A quirky belief recorded by protesters during the Alftanes incident claimed that heavy equipment began malfunctioning only on the final stretch when it approached the disputed boulder. Workers described hearing clicking noises from inside the cab, like someone tapping a spoon on metal, though no one else was around. Eventually, the team leader reportedly said, "We've paved through lava, through marsh, through sheep fields, but this feels different." And he stopped. You step off the paved edge onto moss and gravel. The air shifts slightly. A silence settles that is not empty, but expectant. You don't go further, because you're not here to cross the line. You're here to honor the pause. A scholarly debate lingers about this case. Was it environmentalism cloaked in folklore? Was it community resistance dressed in charming tradition? Or was it a profound moment when a modern society chose humility over efficiency, as one Reykjavik journalist wrote at the time? Whether or not the elves are real, their power is. You sit on the stone just before the cut road. It's warm, though the air is cold. Maybe the sun touched it earlier, or maybe it's been kept warm from the inside. You lay your hand flat on its surface. And in that moment you understand the road was never the point. The stopping was. You whisper, "Thank you," not to anyone you can see, but to the decision itself. Because in this country, sometimes doing nothing is the loudest respect you can give. The sky begins to melt into dusk, now silver, softening into pearl, then amber. A faint pink brushstroke appears along the horizon, like the earth is exhaling from under its heavy winter coat. You rise from the boulder, brushing your gloves off against your coat, and glance once more at the road that never finished. It doesn't look tragic or strange. It just looks wise. Tonight you walk beside the quietest question of all: do you believe? Or do you just want to be safe? Because here in Iceland, those two things are often the same. You follow a fence line now, its posts unevenly spaced, wobbling here and there, clearly built by someone with more heart than a tape measure. Every few meters, the fence takes a wide, deliberate bend around a rock or hillock. Some of the bends seem absurd, like they're dodging nothing at all. But you know better now. A mainstream truth. In modern Icelandic society, belief in elves, or at least in the possibility of them, is less about dogma and more about respectful uncertainty. Surveys show a large portion of Icelanders do not believe in elves outright, but refuse to rule them out and will act accordingly. Why offend something just because you don't understand it? You stop beside one such fence curve. The stone it avoids is modest, no taller than your knee, but blanketed in moss and perfectly round. Someone has placed a strand of red yarn across it, and a few wildflowers, half frozen, are tucked beneath a crevice. You smile. It's not about belief. It's about relationship. A quirky phrase passed through Icelandic communities for generations sums it up: ekki trúa virda, not to believe, to respect. This isn't about superstition. It's about acknowledging that the land might be more than geology, that stories are part of the terrain, that you don't need certainty to practice courtesy. You sit now near the fence, watching the shadows stretch longer with every breath. A small gust picks up, spins a pine needle across your boot, and drops it on the mossy stone beside you. You lean forward, pick it up, and place it back in the fence just in case it was meant to stay there. You remember the road, the house that curved, the dog that nodded, the priest who whispered toward the rock, and the girl who smelled bread in the hill. All of them make up the same soft answer: belief doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes as a decision you make quietly over and over to walk around the stone, even when the path would be easier straight through it. A scholarly reflection on Iceland's elf traditions puts it this way: the hidden people may not ask to be believed, but they seem to expect not to be ignored. You rise as the first true stars appear, and for a brief moment you feel as though the air itself has exhaled in response, as if your respect was heard, maybe even appreciated. You take a final look at the stone, not to study it, but to acknowledge it. Because whether or not you believe in them, you've been traveling with the hidden people all along. They've watched you pause, sidestep, whisper, and kneel, and that might be all they ever asked for. You descend the final slope as dusk folds fully into night. The wind softens behind you like a companion slipping away without a word. What light remains is faint, scattered from windows in a distant village, whose name you'll never need to know. There's no destination now, just a settling, because tonight you reach the last hilltop, And the moss, the maps, the murmurs, they all lead you here. To the final hush of Iceland's long-breathed landscape, to the place where the map curls closed and the moss remains. You walk toward a low rock shelf at the edge of a field flat, broad, its surface worn smooth, like it's been used for everything from sitting to sleeping to watching fog rise. You sit now, legs outstretched, gloved hands resting on your knees. No more notes, no more paths, just the full presence of everything you've passed through. A mainstream fact, cartographers of Iceland's past often left the center of their maps empty or unmarked. Not out of ignorance, but reverence. These blank spaces were not gaps, they were acknowledgments. Areas left open for belief, for mystery, for whatever didn't want to be measured. You look up at the stars. Clear now. Patient. The kind of sky that waits until you've forgotten what you wanted from it before giving you an answer. And below them, the moss stretches quietly in every direction. Still growing. Still undisturbed. A quirky belief tucked into local lore says that moss has memory, that it remembers each footstep, each whisper, and each stone moved. That if you lie down on it too long, it may share a dream with you, but only if it thinks you'll carry it gently. You lie back. Let your spine settle into the softness. And breathe. A scholarly question lingers. Are the hidden people metaphors for nature's resilience, for the land's memory, for Iceland's deep need to narrate its own mystery without solving it? Or are they simply neighbors who asked for quiet and kept it when we didn't? You close your eyes and feel not sleep, not yet, but something close, a presence, not of a figure, but of a world that didn't ask to be understood, just listened to. You think of the stone the road never crossed, the chapel that shared its altar, the map that never named the hill, and the person who once stood here long before you, who bowed to the moss, not to ask for favor, but to say, I see you. Now, as your thoughts slow and your breath deepens, the stars begin to blur, not from clouds, but from rest. The hidden people don't need to be seen tonight. They've been seen enough. And your story, it closes like a well-folded map, still full of places you didn't reach, still warm in the hand. You lie still now, the moss beneath you. A mattress of memory, the sky above, wide and blinking soft as linen. Around you the stones sleep. The wind has gone fully silent. No rustling grass, no creaking post. Only the long, low hush of the Icelandic night settling in. Fog returns not thick, but enough to blur the far hilltops into suggestion. You feel the earth holding you not tightly, but kindly, the way a parent holds a sleeping child's shoulder for just a moment before stepping away. Somewhere near your boot, a strand of yarn curls in the breeze. You don't reach for it. You let it go. The stories you've walked tonight remain behind in the trail. You didn't mark a curve around a boulder, a whisper beside a ridge, a shadow you didn't challenge. And now the map curls closed. not erased, just folded. Its ink still drying in your memory, its lines faint but unforgotten. And the moss, it grows back, already erasing even your lightest step with care. You rest now, not just your body, but your questions. You let the fog take your outline and tuck it gently into the hollow where so many footsteps have paused before you. No stones to move, no spirits to appease, just stillness and breath, and the kind of peace that only arrives when you've listened long enough for silence to start telling stories of its own.